Okay, welcome to part 2 of changing brakes. We're going to be doing the hands-on part. We've gone through the PowerPoint, we've talked about the warning signs of failing brakes, and we've talked about the basics of taking everything off. Now let's go put it all together and put it to use. We're going to be using my 2004 F-150. It doesn't need its brakes changed, but the brakes did need to be inspected, which we're going to do today. So right now we have this thing supported. We've lifted it with the jack, and underneath here we have the jack stand. So we're not working underneath the truck, it's just supported by the jack. Because if this thing fails, you need a safety to catch it, because if you're underneath there, that's going to be 5,000 pounds coming down on you. And you can't come out from underneath that. So a simple jack stand, that could save your life. It's well worth it. We also have the parking brake on, which will keep the truck from rolling, and on top of that, the other safety measure, we have a nice homemade wheel chock. So this truck isn't going anywhere. Safety first when you work on these things. Now, if you want to come over here, I'll show you the brake fluid over here. We have taken the cap off the brake fluid, because if it's filled up and we compress that cylinder, that brake fluid is going to go everywhere, and that brake fluid is flammable, so we don't want that going everywhere. If it's filled up to the top, you may have to take a little bit off before you do this. It's hard to tell, I'm sure on the video, but the brake fluid on this truck is low, which is another reason why these brakes need to get checked. So let's continue on, and we're going to start with taking the caliper off. Okay, so we have my tools laid out right here. We have a C-clamp, we have some brake cleaner, we have a tire iron that's going to double as a little pry bar to try to get that caliper off, and we have a 13mm wrench. I'll choose this one, and I'll show you why right now. When we go ahead and put this thing on there, there's a brake line that runs right beneath that bolt, and we're not going to be able to get a socket on there, so open wrench is going to be very valuable in this situation. So we're going to go ahead and loosen this. Now, I've already loosened this for video aspects, but these bolts should not be wrenched on there. The torque on them is fairly low. You really just want to get it there on there solid where it's not coming off. You don't want to wrench down on these. So we got the top bolt loose. You can see right here. So it's nice and loose. Now we're going to go for the bottom bolt. It's going to be hard to tell, but that bottom bolt's at the bottom. It's going to be hard to see in the video. And on these trucks, and on any vehicle, my experience is they don't always thread them the same time on the same way in every video. One may be clockwise, the other may be counterclockwise to try to loosen these bolts. So it really depends on your video. Also, the size of the bolts are going to be different, so that's something you're going to have to figure out on your own. Just experiment when you get the tire off your vehicle. Now, this caliper is coming right off because I prepared it for the video so we didn't have to struggle with it. But what I brought the tire iron for is try to pry this thing off, because that caliper usually is squeezed on this and it's real hard to get off. But it's doable. You just got to take your time, and you just got to slowly work it off with a pry bar, and just work on take your time and go real slow with it, because this is your brakes, and you don't want to force anything on these brakes too hard. You don't want to damage any of your components, because that's why we're doing this, is to save money. So if you damage your components, you're going to have to replace them, which defeats the whole purpose of it. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and pry this off. So we got this off, and right now is a good time to inspect this. I actually inspected this one earlier, and it may be real hard to see in the video, but there's a crack running right along here. So, you know, this is why we're inspecting the truck, and this is why we're doing it ourselves, so we can actually take a look at what's going on with our vehicles. So this caliper will have to be replaced later on, but that'll be not for this video. So we're inspecting this, and let's just say everything looks good. And so we're going to hang it on our control arm. We don't want it supporting this by this brake line. You know, you watch some videos, they say, oh, it's absolutely fine to hang it from the brake line. I disagree. This is a real important piece of, you know, this holds all your brake fluid. This thing fails, your brake is failing. So we don't want to put any undue pressure on this. So first things first is we're going to hang it on the control arm. It may be hard to see because of the shadows. And I know on the PowerPoint I said use a bungee cord. I couldn't find one. So I'm using a nice little red wire here to secure it to this control arm to keep it from falling down. Actually, on the first video that I shot, the control arm did fall down because I didn't support it with this red wire. You know, which would usually be real bad, but we have to replace this anyway, so we'll fix all that when I replace that. So right now this is supported real well. Our caliper is supported, it's not going anywhere. And so now we're going to go ahead and inspect everything else. We have our old brakes right here. Right now is a good time to go ahead and take a picture of everything. I like to take lots of pictures with everything because my memory isn't 100%, and I don't always remember how things go back together. But like I said, you know, all we're doing is taking this apart and putting it right back together exactly the way it was. So you take lots of pictures so you have a reference point of things of where everything was at. These brakes actually come with little springs. See these little springs here? I took these off for video aspects, but this is the difference between different brakes. Is these little things go in the brake pads, and they help keep the brake pads from seizing together. However, they do make it quite difficult to put the brake pads back on because they're constantly pushing apart. So we took those off for video aspects, but those are the little things that they add in these brakes that if you don't have, it's going to mess you up if you don't put them back on exactly the way it was. So now, if you can take a look right here at our brake pad, and it's nice and simple as just sliding it out of this bracket. And here we go. It is absolutely out. So we're just going to place it to the side. We're going to take the back one off. And we're going to go and inspect it. Another thing I noticed when I took this off earlier is that there's actually a chip out of these brakes. These are ceramic brakes. They're very good brakes, but obviously there was a defect in one of the brakes. So when I put that caliper back on, we are going to have to get new brakes, and we're going to have to put it back on correctly. Also, now is a good time to inspect your cylinder here, and it may be hard for video aspects, but there's actually a nice gorge in here, which maybe a rock or something got on this. So we're going to have to also replace that. Now we're not going to take this bracket off, but this bracket right here that holds the brake pads, that's all that's holding this on. So there's two bolts behind here, and they're larger, and those are held on with tighter. It's a much larger torque that these things are specified to. So you will have to put some force to take these brackets off. But once that you take, it's only 2 bolts. There's one on the top and there's one on the bottom. You just got to take those bolts off, and this bracket will come right off. And this thing, until it's already loose. So this thing just slides off. I'm going to slide the new one back on. Put this bracket back on. And then these brakes. Now, there's some brake grease that we want to go ahead and throw on here. It will help decrease the squealing of the brakes. You do not want to get it on the pad side. You only want to get it on this side. The pad side, remember, that's what stops your vehicle. So you don't want any grease on there. You want that clean. So you want to go ahead and put the grease on each side, and then you're able to just slide your caliper back on. Or not the caliper, you're going to slide the brake pads right back on, right in the way that it went before. Also, what I didn't mention before, which we'll put that up back on in a second, but what I didn't mention before was this brake cleaner. And this brake cleaner is just exactly what it is. Okay, we're back again. We had a dead battery on the phone, so we have to take off where we left off. So we were talking about cleaning the new brake disc off. When the brake discs come, they come with sort of like an oil film to keep them from rusting, and we want to go ahead and just quickly spray it down with a brake parts cleaner to get that off. This brake parts cleaner evaporates very fast, so it doesn't take any time at all. It's just a quick spray and it just knocks that oil film off. And so we go ahead and we reinstall the brake disc. We reinstall the bracket, like I said, the large bolt on top and the bottom. You really want to cinch those down. Like I said in the video earlier, the torque for that is rather high. So we want to go ahead and really get that down there, especially if you don't have a torque wrench. We've reinstalled our new brake pads, and now we're ready to put the caliper back on. Now, before we put the caliper back on, we have to go ahead and compress the cylinders, because the cylinders were set for the old brake pads, and the new brake pads are thicker because they're not worn down yet. So this one is, we're going to try to do, it's usually fairly difficult to do with one hand, but we're going to make it work. This is sort of a part that you need 3 hands on. So we're going to go ahead and put our nice big C-clamp right on that cylinder, and we're going to go ahead and just lightly press it down. It'll just compress that cylinder back in there, and that way this will slide right back on your new brake pads. And it's really save you a lot of heartache of trying to squeeze the old one back on. I mean, you're not going to be able to get it on. And like I said earlier, you don't want to put too much pressure on this, because you put too much pressure on everything, it could damage your brakes. So we've compressed these cylinders right down there. That's going to give us plenty of room to get this back on, get this caliper back on. So we're going to go ahead and flip it back on. We have all the hardware put back on correctly because we referenced our videos or referenced our pictures earlier, just to make sure that we have everything back on there, and then we're just simply screwing the bolts back in place. Now, like I said, you know, don't give up if you're twisting the wrong way. Just simply twist the other way. And we'll get these right back on. And this one, when we tighten it, we don't want to crank down on it. We just want to get it where it's taut. However, that's still a little loose. So, say like I said in the other video, we just turn it the other way. So we want to get that on, and then we screw the other one back on. And make sure you get them all lined up. So you want it tighter than hand tight. And if you have a chance, go ahead and look on the internet and try to figure out the proper torque. You can go to Harbor Freight and you can buy a torque wrench for fairly cheap, and it will definitely get you in the proper ballpark of where you need to be. But see, we're not cranking down on them. We're getting them nice and tight though. Now these are back on, and that's all there is to it. We have it back on. We're going to make sure to come over here, check your brake fluid. If any is spilled out, in case, do it. You want to clean that off. Put the cap back on. Now we're ready to just go ahead and put back on our wheels. You want to go ahead and pump the brakes. I always suggest a nice slow ride around the neighborhood before you go ahead and go on the highway, just to make sure everything's adjusted right. If everything's adjusted right, then you are good to go. And there we go. It's just easy as that, and we have saved $200 to $300. It's the easiest way to save some money if you're just willing to get your hands a little dirty. And that's all I got. Thank you.